Cape Town, UCT, is still the top university in Africa. That is according to the Times Higher Education World University Rankings for 2019. The rankings are published annually by Times Higher Education, which is a weekly magazine that's based in London, which reports on issues related to higher education. The University of Witwatersrand was the second best ranked university in South Africa. Stellenbosch University was the third, and the University of KwaZulu-Natal the next best. We look into the rankings with University South Africa's CEO, Professor Ahmed Bawa, who joins me now in our studios in Johannesburg. Prof, good afternoon. Always good to see you.
Nice to see you too.
And when I looked at the rankings, I thought of you and I was like, I know Prof's reservations on this. Your take on, because it looks like we've improved.
Yes. So look, I think that I think we have to accept that the rankings indicate that our universities have held themselves together over the last 3 years, during the turmoil of the Fees Must Fall and Roads Must Fall campaigns. And more importantly, of course, some of the universities have actually progressed up the rankings.
Yeah.
And I think, that's a good sign. And I think that we must really congratulate those universities for achieving that. At the same time, I think we must be careful not to expect all of our universities to be in the top ranked, amongst the top ranked universities.
Because I remember the last time we had this conversation, you were basically saying it is sort of unfair to look at how the scores are calculated, because a variety of issues are looked into, the learning environment, research most importantly.
Correct. And that's absolutely right. And the rankings depend very heavily on a certain number of parameters. One of them is rankings, another one is the level of internationalization of its staff, the student-staff ratios and so on. And many of our universities are primarily teaching and learning universities. They're not research-led universities. And so we shouldn't expect them, in terms of these rankings, to kind of appear very high up on those lists. Perhaps the other thing I should just mention is that there are about 30,000 universities in the world.
Worldwide.
And so, when we say UCT appearing at 150, that's a huge achievement, yes.
But what specifically do you think they improved on?
Yeah, so we've done very well in terms of research outputs over the last few years. Just to give you one small figure, between 2010 and 2018, the number of research journal articles that were produced has increased from about 9,000 to 22,000.
Wow.
And of course the research-led universities like UCT, WIT, Stellenbosch, Pretoria, UKZN, they are the ones that really produce the vast majority of those research articles. So that's one very good sign. The second is that some of our universities seem to be doing better in terms of kind of staff-student ratios, for example. So UCT, as I recall, has a staff-student ratio of 12 to 1, which is a very good staff-student ratio. WITS is in the early 20s, I think. So that's a very good sign that universities are holding together their staff-student complements, if you like. Yeah.
And looking at some of the rankings now, Prof, I'm looking at, for example, the University of South Africa, UNISA, slipped from 800 to 1,000 best ranked institution.
Yeah, I think that UNISA has been having a set of challenges. I mean, I think that we have to accept that, especially with kind of the faltering of the kind of financial aid system and so on. But having said that, we should not be expecting UNISA to be ranked high up there on the basis that its function is primarily access to undergraduate education. That's I'm very proud to say I'm a UNISA graduate.
Yeah.
So and it came at a time when I just couldn't go to university. It was impossible for me to go to university. So it plays that very crucial role, and that kind of role is not actually measured in these in these rankings.
But what do we need to do to improve on research and citations, for example? Do we need to produce more master's degrees graduates and PhD graduates?
Correct. And look, there are a number of things that we have to do. The first is to increase the number of postgraduate students in our system.
Okay.
By the way, we've been doing well. We've been increasing gradually, but and by the way, the NDP gives us a target that by the time we get to 2030, we should have 5,000 graduates, PhD graduates a year. And we're on track to achieving that.
How many do we have per
At the moment, we produce about 2,700 a year. And there's a very direct correlation between doctoral education, masters in doctoral education, and research output. So it's a good sign that we're on a good trajectory.
Yeah.
The second thing is really to begin to look at very seriously the student-staff ratios, because at the moment many of our universities are operating with huge student-staff ratios. And what that means basically is that academics just don't have the time to do research and so on.
But then with this free fee higher education, are we hoping to improve on the numbers, because many students disadvantaged didn't have the financial necessities to go further their studies?
So look, there's very good evidence that students who were supported by NSFAS in the past, before the new system came into place, performed on average slightly better than students who were not funded by NSFAS. Financial security is a very important thing for students. So we are expecting exactly what you're saying, that with the new system in place, that there should be a much better throughput rate of students through the system. And of course, that hopefully will flow into postgraduate education and research and so on.
But the interest, is it there for the working group to further their studies? Because I must say competition is very tight. You're seeing very young children, of course, graduating with their master's degrees and PhDs.
Look, there's no question about the fact that the demand for education is growing.
It is.
And, and fortunately for us, of course, there's also, the universities are expanding, but also we're seeing an expansion of the private sector, which is important to meet that big demand. The big question for me really is whether we're expanding in the right areas. So, for example, are we expanding in the areas of science, engineering, health sciences, and so on? And that's a big challenge for us. And it's primarily got to do with the pipeline, the students that are coming from the school system who are not yet fully kind of prepared by the school system.
So that speaks to the importance of basic education as well.
Without question, and it's absolutely fundamental to the challenge we face.
Now, Prof, in conclusion, are we ever going to see a situation where one of our institutions is in the top 5, top 10?
Look, I think that's still a long way off. And I think that we must be careful not to... Look, let me give you just one small statistic. See, a university that does very well in the rankings regularly is California Institute of Technology, CIT. It's got 4,000 students. 3,000 of the 4,000 students are postgraduate students. So,
so there are a number of issues.
And our universities are just not going to be there. It's going to be a long time. Our conditions are very different. And I think we have to be careful not to think of these rankings as measuring everything that our universities do.
But they should be a motivation tool, isn't it?
Of course, absolutely. And we must really aim to be better and better.
Prof, we have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for coming through. It's always a pleasure to see you.
It's a pleasure.
All right. Well, there you have it. Professor Ahmed Bawa. He's CEO for the University of South Africa, of course, talking to us about the latest rankings, where the University of Cape Town is still the top university in Africa, and Wits University there as well. Stellenbosch also there, and the University of KwaZulu-Natal, the next best ranked university.